Runic Ward is a brand new defensive resource that's being added to Path of Exile 2 in the upcoming Return of the Ancients update. And despite its name, this is not to be confused with Ward from Path of Exile 1, which has entirely different functionality. Now, this was described as a resource during the reveal livestream, and on the information page for the Return of the Ancients, Runic Ward is described as a new form of defense. This stat also appears at the top of gear pieces next to the other basic defensive stats like armor, evasion, or energy shield, and scales with quality on gear like the other defenses too. But before we get into how you obtain Runic Ward, let's discuss how this mechanic actually works. Runic Ward acts as an extension to your life pool, somewhat similar to Energy Shield, but Energy Shield sits on top of your life, absorbing damage first. Runic Ward does the opposite. It will only absorb damage by default after your life pool has been fully depleted. Visually, Runic Ward appears as a runic symbol on top of your life globe, and if you enable resource numbers to be shown in the options, you'll also be able to see it numerically listed like life, mana, or energy shield. When you lose Runic Ward, you can see the symbol visually depleting, and if you lose all of your Runic Ward and you have no life, you die. Now, one of the things that we're not too sure about just yet is how Runic Ward recovery will work. You can see here in the reveal footage that the Runic Ward is slowly recovering over time after being partially depleted, and during the Q&A after the reveal, Mark mentioned that you'd be able to stack Runic Ward regeneration, and implied that you'd be able to invest quite heavily into the mechanic if you wanted to. We're not sure yet though where those sources of Runic Ward regeneration will come from, or if the resource has a natural amount of regeneration similar to mana for example, which I think is quite likely considering that the Kalguuran Skills will cost Runic Ward to activate. Based on what we've seen so far though, it doesn't appear that the basic method of obtaining Runic Ward by simply Runeforging your gear will provide any additional modifiers that enhance Runic Ward other than just the resource itself. But Mark seemed to imply that the new runes and the new Ezomite and Kalguuran themed uniques may play a part here, and I can imagine that there will be some uniques with special properties that will allow you to recover Runic Ward in different ways, or even use the resource differently to its basic function. Now, to use Runic Ward in your build, you'll primarily be making use of Runeforging, which is a new crafting bench. This bench allows you to spend Verisium, a new crafting material found in the Runes of Aldur encounters, to change a piece of gear into its rune-forged version. In the Q&A, Jonathan confirmed that early on in the campaign, the Runeforging bench will pretty much just be a strict upgrade, providing Runic Ward on top of any other stats that your gear already had. However, when moving into the endgame and when Runeforging certain unique items, the process won't be quite as simple, as you'll begin to see more trade-offs. The extreme example that they showcased in the reveal livestream was Brass Dome, which has its base armor fully stripped off on the Runeforged version to simply grant a huge chunk of Runic Ward instead. In the Q&A, Mark discussed that in the endgame, some base types would convert to gain just a small amount of Runic Ward, while others will lose most or all of their basic defenses to provide Runic Ward instead, and there will also be some that end up somewhere in the middle for a more balanced result. But importantly, Mark confirmed that you'll be able to hover over the right panel on the Runeforging bench to be able to see the outcome before committing to it. So there won't be a scenario where you risk a well-crafted piece of gear or a rare unique item on a random outcome. And based on what was said here, it seems that the outcomes may be tied to base types in a way that you'll be able to actually craft your gear using a specific base type, knowing how the Runeforging bench will actually interact with it later on, which I think is quite interesting because it means that they can introduce base types to the meta that may not have been used much otherwise. Okay, before moving on to discuss the new Kalguuran Skills, I want to briefly go over scaling Runic Ward. Now, we know that this new resource will be treated as a type of defense alongside armor, evasion, and energy shield, and that means that you should be able to utilize modifiers to global defenses to scale the amount of Runic Ward that you can obtain. We also saw a runic alloy in the reveal stream that would allow you to replace a modifier on amulets with a modifier to increase maximum Runic Ward, and the same one will also allow you to provide flat ward modifiers on rings. There are also these basic runes that were shown to allow you to scale Runic Ward gained from armor items, and a few others there too to weave in some extra mechanics into Runic Ward if you want to. Now, one of the most interesting components of this new resource is the fact that there will be new types of skills attached to it, Kalguuran Skills, which spend Runic Ward to activate instead of mana or life. The design of these skills seems to be a much more universal one, so they can be utilised in many different builds. Kalguuran Skills will only have a level requirement, and they won't have any attribute requirement or colour associated with them, so there's not going to be many barriers to entry to using these skills, and for the more utility-focused ones, you may just want to obtain a small amount of Runic Ward in your build to make use of that skill. But it looks like there will be some Kalguuran skills that will allow you to heavily invest into Runic Ward for a payoff. For example, this Runic Infusion Support, which adds a Runic Ward cost to the linked attack, and adds damage based on that cost. Now, I want to go back to the mechanics of Runic Ward for a moment, because this is the first time that they're introducing a resource that goes under the life pool, and that's going to create some interesting interactions. For example, there are several unique items that make you lose life each second, or make you lose some life on kill, and these items usually grant quite a powerful upside if you're able to mitigate that downside. But theoretically, you'll be able to build a character that essentially uses Runic Ward as their life pool, and mostly ignores life as a resource. That means that you'll be able to benefit from the upside of these modifiers, and even if your life drops to 0, you'll still have your Runic Ward to keep you alive. Things get really interesting when you consider Defiance of Destiny, a unique amulet which recovers a large chunk of your missing life before being hit by an enemy. Well, if you're completely out of life but you still have Runic Ward available, you'll get maximum efficiency out of this modifier, and I think you could put together a build that kind of has a hybrid approach to life and Runic Ward where you scale both resources, and you'll be very tanky with this amulet. There's also Chaos Inoculation, which should be mentioned here, because if you wanted to build a character that's fully focused on Runic Ward as your primary life pool, this keystone will grant the huge upsides of being immune to chaos damage and bleeding, whilst capping you at 1 life, which may not be much of an issue if you don't have much of any investment into life scaling or recovery. Also, there's this node here which may suddenly be a bit more interesting after the introduction of Runic Ward. And overall, I think there is going to be some really fun builds coming out of this edition of Runic Ward to Path of Exile 2, but I'd love to hear what others think about this. Are there some interesting interactions that I've missed? Let me know by commenting below. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.